Welcome to Screwtape Letters, letter 21. So, this letter picks up after Screwtape had been talking about different means of sexual temptation. And so in this one, it's all focused about this idea of mine, of ownership and possession that humans have. So he starts off by talking about how there are other means of temptation, which are particularly useful in agreement with at the same time as sexual temptation. And the main one he talks about are misfortunes that are conceived as injury. So things that happen to a person that they perceive or that they think is an injury to them. It says the sense of injury depends on the feeling of a legitimate claim that has been denied. So the more claims that we have on life, the more things that we think we deserve or ought to have, the more injuries or misfortunes we think that can befall us. And one of the main ones he's focusing on is when a person, the patient in this case, has time taken away from him that he thought would be his. So the examples he gives are an unexpected visitor. So he was looking forward to a nice evening by himself and someone shows up. Or when he is going to have a little meeting, a get-together with a friend, and his friend's talkative wife comes up when he wasn't expecting it. So just this idea that like things that we think should be ours, when they're taken away from us, that then we feel insulted or that we feel like there's an injury that's been made to us. This letter I took, was like actually kind of a personally challenging one for me to read because I definitely count my time as my own, and so this was a good challenge for me. So people tend to think of their time as their own to do with as they choose, but that is not a correct assumption. This is quite absurd, and Screwtape goes on to say there is no argument in defense of this belief, right? It says he must never be permitted to doubt is that the total from which these deductions have been made was, in some mysterious sense, his own personal birthright, that we have a right to do what we want with the time that we have, which isn't true. A quote that I thought was really good here, it says, "The man can neither make nor retain one moment of time. It all comes to him by pure gift." So just a thing for us to remember and to really meditate on is that the time isn't ours because we didn't come up with it. We didn't create the time that we have or the time that we've been given. It's all a gift. And so, it doesn't come to us as ours. It comes to us actually from God. So in that sense, it says in theory, man is committed to a total service of God, right? That's what humans by right are committed to, since the time comes to us from God and our life comes to us from God. He goes on to say that if God appeared in bodily form and demanded total service of humans, then we would not refuse him, and indeed we'd be happy to serve him. And if he gave us a half an hour off for the day, we'd almost be disappointed that he wasn't using us or kind of telling us what to do. So we think that time is ours, but this isn't necessarily true. It says the demon's job is to keep the patient in the dark about this truth, so that we're committed to a total service of God to keep that a secret. He says, wrap a darkness about it, and in the center of that darkness, let his sense of ownership in time lie silent, uninspective, and operative. So we shouldn't, the demons want to keep us humans from thinking about this ownership in time. So to not look at it, not inspect it, to just keep it working that like we think we own the time that we have. He goes on to talk about how the demons encourage a sense of ownership with everything. Right? It says the humans are always putting up claims to ownership which sound equally funny in heaven and in hell, so we must keep them doing so much. It says that much of the modern resistance to chastity comes from people's belief that they own their bodies, right? And we hear this all of the time, like as arguments for different things, my body, my choice, and whatnot. It says those vast and perilous estates, so our bodies are vast and perilous estates, pulsating with that energy that made the worlds, in which they find themselves without their consent and from which they are ejected at the pleasure of another. So it's true that in us, God put his very self, his very life. And so in us is the power, the energy that made the world, that made creation, because God gives us our life. However, none of us chose to be born. None of us chose to come into the world when we did. And we don't get to choose when we exit the world. So at the pleasure of another. And so, just really outlining and just describing this false sense of ownership that we have. So then it says, so the demons produce this sense of ownership not only by pride, but by confusion. We teach them not to notice the different senses of the possessive pronoun. The finely graded differences that run from my boots through my dog, my servant, my wife, my father, my master, my country, my God. So to reduce all of these to the same sense as that of like my boots, so that like just like I own my shoes, I own my husband, I own my father, I own my country, I own my God, that like, you know, that my God is in my corner, that I have a claim on his services. So the demons, again, they're just trying to confuse us. They're trying to keep us from truth. They're trying to keep us from what is accurate, and they're trying to befuddle us. And so right here, they want us to understand is that we do have a right to ownership, and we have a right to own everything and say that everything is ours. It says, at all the time, the joke is that the word mine, in its fully possessive sense, cannot be uttered by a human being about anything. If we really examine the things that we think are mine or are ours, even our shoes, in a certain sense, we don't fully possess them, right? I didn't make that material that made those shoes. I didn't create the shoes themselves. And they're very loosely belonging to me. I could lose a shoe. I could break a shoe. Someone could steal shoes. My house could burn down and my shoes could burn. So this idea that we use this word mine so often is a mistaken idea, right? And then he ends by saying, in the long run, either our father, the devil, or the enemy, God, will say mine of each thing that exists, and specially of each man. They will find out in the end, never fear, to whom their time, their souls, and their bodies really belong. Certainly not to them, whatever happens. So this is a great idea that isn't one that's meant to be like depressing or, you know, kill our spirits, but really a recognition that like when I wake up each morning, it's not what do I want to do today, but what does God want me to do today? You know, that's why it's so important to start our day in prayer, to think about the things that he's put in front of us, doing our schoolwork, you know, exercising, eating, drinking, sleeping. There are many things that we can do, but understanding that it's not just about what we want and what we decide, but that we owe our lives to God. We owe our lives, you know, to our family and to our loved ones and whatnot. And so that's kind of the idea of this letter.